So one day he had an idea. We're going to gather all of these people together. We're going to find the most magical place in the world. And we're going to celebrate friendship and happiness together. So he gathered his motley crew, and they started off on their journey. Along the way, they met a magical creature. And this creature told them about an enchanted boat. And on this boat, they could celebrate friendship and happiness to their heart's content. So naturally, the motley crew and the handsome man were like, let's find it. Eventually, they found this boat. But what they also found was an evil captain who was guarding the entrance. And despite their best efforts, they could not get past this evil captain. Finally, just in the nick of time, the magical creature from before showed up to save the day. And how does this creature save the day? By singing a magical song. This song was so magical that it softened the heart and the mind of the evil captain and made the evil captain believe in friendship and happiness once again. So, he led our handsome man and the motley crew onto the boat. They were able to celebrate friendship and happiness as they wanted to when they started their journey. And everybody lived happily ever after. Fairy tales can often feel relatable to us because they can take elements from our real lives. And in the case of the story I just spun or told, it takes elements from my personal life. Except I didn't run into a magical creature, and the handsome comment was probably somewhat self-serving. And most important for this talk, it didn't actually have a happy ending. So we were a motley crew, and we were out to celebrate. We did find a boat, and we found someone, a captain, who was at the entrance of that boat. But when it came time for us to see our magical creature come back to the story and save the day, we instead encountered potential allies who, rather than speaking up for our right to be on the boat with them to celebrate, instead took up for the logic and the behavior of the captain and took it upon themselves to explain to us what was really going on. I share this story to illustrate a point. I think sometimes when we think about allies, we think about heroes, people who come in at the last minute, the final act of the movie to save the day. Maybe you think an ally looks like somebody who rides in on a white horse, looking like a beacon of hope. Maybe you think it's a knight in shining armor. Or maybe you think it's the hero who comes in to turn the tide of the battle in the final frame of the movie. But I'm actually here to say today that allyship is not about being the hero. It's about being the trusted sidekick. And so, if nothing else, I want you to leave today thinking about how you can show up as a trusted sidekick in your own personal lives. Whether that's at work with coworkers, with friends or family and people that you see every day, or even some yet to be discovered community that you've not connected with. So, how do we develop ourselves into trusted sidekicks? Well, I play a lot of games, watch a lot of movies, and watch a lot of Netflix. And from all of those things, I feel like trusted sidekicks have three characteristics. The first is that they're there for the everyday moments. The second is that they're willing to confront ugly truths, whether those are truths about themselves or about the environment that they occupy. And finally, trusted sidekicks use their privilege and their powers, their skills, their magic to help the protagonist throughout their journey achieve their goals at the end. So, when we think about being an everyday sidekick, Timon and Pumbaa comes to mind for me and The Lion King, because they were there when Simba was at his lowest moment after he had just lost his father and run away from home. They're also there at the highest moment when Simba assumed the throne of Proud Rock and took his place in the great circle of life. They also showed up in all of those moments where Simba grew from a cub to a lion. They shared their paradise home with Simba, taught him to eat bugs. They taught him Hakuna Matata and how to move forward with no worries. And most important, when he finally decided that it was time to go back to Pride Rock and fight for what he believed in, Timon and Pumbaa showed up to be right there beside him to go into the heat of battle. There was even one scene in The Lion King where Timon, Simba, and Pumbaa were walking on the same log for what seemed like days and nights on end, over and over. And I feel like that's a perfect metaphor for what being an everyday ally is. It's literally just being there for the protagonist as they try to put one foot in front of the other. For our second point, we can think of Mushu the dragon from Mulan. Because Mushu, when he began his story in Mulan, decided to be a spiritual guardian for Mulan, not because he believed in Mulan's cause, but for selfish reasons. He wanted to prove that he could be the best spiritual guardian of any other spiritual guardian. And so, a lot of Mushu's initial help actually did more to hurt Mulan than help her in her own journey. And it actually wasn't until a later point in the movie where Mushu did some self-reflection and confronted an ugly truth, where he realized that being a spiritual guardian was about more than self-interest and about personal goals. It was actually about being loyal and sacrificing when necessary to help somebody else achieve the dreams or the goals that they set out to achieve. And so once Mushu realized this, he was able to help Mulan not only bring honor to her family, and of course save the day because it's a Disney movie, but also help Mulan prove that a woman could be as fierce of a warrior as any man could. And finally, when we think of the third point, using your privilege to help others throughout their story, it's really about making the impossible possible. And I can't think of any better characteristic or a person who demonstrates that characteristic than the person who's not a person, the genie from Aladdin. Because when Aladdin began his journey, he saw himself purely as a street rat, maybe a street rat with big dreams, but a street rat nonetheless. And everybody around Aladdin saw him the same. But the genie saw something else in Aladdin, and he used his magic or his privileges to help Aladdin see that the prince that he wanted to be was actually the prince that was already there to begin with. And so he gave him fancy clothes and an elephant and a flying carpet. But ultimately, what he really did was help Aladdin realize his own self-worth. And by the end of the story, realize that his dreams were attainable the entire time. So that's it. At the end of the day, being an ally is being a trusted sidekick, or more particularly, being a meerkat, a warthog, a dragon, and a genie. Pretty simple. So when we think about being a trusted sidekick, and we think about how that relates to allyship, I want us to think about how we can show up for the everyday moments. Not just when it's convenient or comfortable for us, but when we can be there to put one step in front of the other with the people that we surround ourselves with in our lives. We need to think about how we can confront ugly truths, about ourselves especially, because we all, as was mentioned earlier, have biases that we suffer from, and we should be accountable to ourselves about fixing those, and also honest with ourselves about how they show up in our day-to-day. And finally, we should think about our privilege and how we can use that to actually amplify the voices of people around us, particularly when we sit in communities where people don't have the luxury of always speaking up in every moment themselves. The journey and the road that we take to be allies and fight for justice, fight for equality, and fight for fairness, and fight for the rights of other people can sometimes feel long and arduous, but I feel that if we have the right sidekick on our journey, we can all achieve our happily ever after. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Corey. And last but not least, we have Melinda coming to the stage, who is the founder of Tech Inclusion, a fierce advocate for equal and equitable opportunity and access. Melinda is also going to be giving a TED Talk in New York next week. And the genesis of this event, per my understanding, is Tiffany and Melinda were talking about opportunities to showcase this TED Talk, and here we are today. So this is going to be a great opportunity for Melinda to practice, share her story, and hopefully inspire some of you guys tonight, or some of you all tonight.